Today I have with me former Speaker of the House, Swordmaker, who is here to offer his thoughts on the current Speaker election and what his plans are for the future of NUSA. Thank you for being with me here today, Sword.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I first wanted to ask you about the current Speaker election, which has become more contentious over the last week, more so than most thought. And we just recently today had the Speaker of the House resigned or announce his intention to resign. We had last night the President's sudden rush, who said that he would be seeking the speakership. And just about a week ago, we had H. Prince George, who recently won re-election to the House of Representatives and was a former opponent of yours in the speaker race, who also said that he would be running. So what are your thoughts on this race as it stands and who you would like to see as speaker?
Well, on if I'm just hitting the topic of capitalized first, I think his resignation was appropriate. From my understanding, what happened was capitalized offered Speaker Pro Tempore to a multitude of people, and as a result, he got caught. Speakers have done that in the past, and they haven't gotten caught. Which is, I guess, fine for them, but in some cases more now than back then. You're going to get caught doing something like that. So I think it was appropriate that he resigned.
Do you think that Speaker Pro Tempore is used inappropriately as a bargaining chip in those elections?
Yes, very much so. And speaking as someone who was running for speaker, it is used as a bargaining chip. You usually keep it to keep your competitors far away from the seat that you're aiming for, which in this case is the speakership. So yes, it is used as a bargaining chip. But in the case of Prince George running, last time he ran against me, he won, obviously. And I think that if there's anything telling about his run, it's that we can look at the 1 month that he had in speakership before he was expelled and see what he did then. There wasn't really much to come from his leadership of the House from the most recent term he had.
And
As far as
just to add to
so,
the H. Prince
yeah,
George conversation, he's framing himself as like an outsider,
he's
but
not
I
an
think
outsider.
that many would disagree with that characterization.
He's not okay. So the popular thing to do is to frame yourself as an outsider, and this partially comes from the 2016 election. And even times before that too, but it's most popular during the 2016 election, and I'm talking in terms of like real life right now because we saw the ultimate outsider win the election.
They
So
said
they
the
think
same thing
the
too.
way, yeah, exactly. So they think the way that they're going to yield the most results is to frame themselves as an outsider. But to be quite honest with you, the way you win elections is by being an insider. You have to become an insider in order to gain that influence, in order to build that sphere of sort of leadership and influence around yourself and bring those in who will work collaboratively with you. There's nothing wrong with being an insider. Um, I mean, granted, you have uh, corruption that could fester, but really that could happen with any sort of leader that's placed in their position. So I mean, framing yourself as an outsider, especially in HHP's case, is not appropriate whatsoever. HHP is not an outsider. He's been in government longer than most people I know, and he's doing that merely to deceive people and trying
Mhm.
to get a multitude of votes, I'd imagine.
So let's move on before we wrap this up and just talk about the race in general and get off of H. Prince George specifically. So, what do you
hmm
think of the current state of the race, and especially just touch on the president recently announcing his intentions to run for the speakership?
Um, I mean, and I'm talking candidly here. Uh, I personally haven't kept in touch recently with Sutton to know enough about him to know his intentions with the game and so on and so forth. But when he was entering his second term of leadership for the president, I would constantly get Steam notifications from him or just various notifications on Twitter, maybe things along the lines of, I don't know if I want to run again. I don't know if I want to play the game anymore. Obviously, being in a position of leadership is stressful on him. And as a friend, I'd probably advise him not to do that if he's still in the same situation that he was again. It could very well be that he was just tired of being the president and wanted something fresh, and this is his gateway towards that something fresh. But if it's not, then I I would not advise running for another leadership role because we could probably see a replication of what I saw when Sutton ran for his second term.
Is there anyone that you'd want to see as speaker as someone who's held the job in the past?
I don't want to see anybody as speaker that's held the job in the past. I mean, personally, and I think a lot of people could agree with me too, I'm tired of seeing the same people run for governmental positions over and over and over again. That's the reason why NUSA isn't um, doesn't really have as much traction, really, as it used to. We used to get new faces frequently. That's kind of died down in a sense, and some will argue it's because of school or it's because of the holidays, blah blah blah. We can blame it on whatever we want, but to be quite frank with you, if you're going to keep the people engaged, you have to give them something fresh. And the same people running with different ideas is not something fresh. It's them fooling you, thinking there's something fresh by maybe giving you new ideas. So I would like to see someone new, and I don't know. I think economics master would be an interesting choice, though I'm not sure I'd entirely consider him someone new, but it would be quite refreshing.
And so my last question for you is more on a personal level than in regards to the speaker elections, but you've been kind of like in and out of the U.S. for a little bit since you um, lost re-election as speaker.
Mhm.
So do you have any plans of sticking around, or will you continue your status as a floater, so to say?
Um, I mean, and like I said, I posted this on Twitter a little bit earlier, and I made a few tweets about this just because, like, that's who I am. And when I think of something, I go on Twitter and I tweet about it. But I posted earlier what I just said about Sutton and HHP too. The same people are being reelected over and over. That's why it's not fun for me, and that's why it's not fun for a lot of people. Um, and I get that's coming from someone who's already been elected speaker and reelected again. And I get they're all just trying to have fun, and that's completely understandable. Everybody's just looking for their own definition of fun, but a lot of people don't find it interesting when you have the same people running over and over again, and that needs to be solved in a sense. So, and to answer your question of am I coming back, I'm I'm not entirely sure. My guess is if I were to come back, it would be later on, not right now, just because I'm trying to finish up my senior year and I need that to glide by as easily as possible.
Mm.
But no, there's just too much going on for me right now, and I just don't have any incentive to come back to NUSA and jump in the game again. Though I've hinted at it a few times, it just never really happened.
It is interesting, just as a final closing thought, that before you became speaker, you were relatively new on the scene. You had only been in the
Mhm.
U.S. actually for a few months, and then shortly after you became representative, and then shortly after that you were speaker. So that was a
Mhm.
relatively quick rise, and you were a new face on the scene. And then you,
Mhm.
some would say
Yeah.
you faded just as quickly. But after your speakership, you went on to work with the president as chief of staff for a brief period, and then you
Mhm.
eventually phased out Roblox. It seems.
Yeah. I mean, I joined NUSA in April and I became speaker in June. So that's like 2 months of being in the House, not even maybe. And then I lost my reelection sometime. I think it was in September, if I'm not
Mm-hmm.
mistaken. I think it was in September, sometime late September. I lost my reelection to HHP. And then I joined Sudden as White House Chief of Staff, but honestly, nothing really came of that because I was already starting to fade away because I lost my motivation from losing the speakership, blah blah blah. It just all sort of went away. And plus, I was applying to colleges at that point. I just really did not have the time. I have a cold too. I
Mm.
sound kind of nasty right now, but yeah.
All right. Well, want to thank you for offering your thoughts on that, and wish you the best of luck in both your real life and I guess on for your Roblox endeavors if you choose to have them.
Well, thank you, Patrick.